Welcome everybody. This is a panel called Everyone Can Game. We really kind of just want to talk about accessibility features in games, and I've got a great panel up here that are going to kind of go back and forth. So let's hop into it. Everybody enjoying MAGFest so far this year? Woo! Whoa, whoa, whoa. Try it again. All right, we'll take that.
There we go.
I'm just going to do a couple quick questions. Is this anybody's first MAGFest? I like these ones. Awesome. Welcome. We love having you here. Awesome. And since this panel usually, it will talk about people with disabilities. It's kind of its main focus. So I just want to know, are there any educators in the building? Ooh, way more than I expected. Awesome. Any related service providers? Raise your hand. I know you are. Speech language pathology, OT, PT. Hey, which one?
OT.
OT, all right, rock and roll. Any parents? Advocates? Siblings? Yeah, okay, yep. And any self-identifiers who would like to do so. Okay, welcome. We love having you here.
What are self-identifiers?
Thank you. Self-identifiers?
Yeah.
So if you have a disability and you would like to share, you are more than welcome to do so. We do not require you to do that.
Oh, sure.
Because that would be cruel.
Autism ADHD.
Yeah, awesome. Way to go. So everybody's here. We're kind of just all in the same space, and we want to make sure that everybody has what we like to call accessibility. So I'll move into introductions really quick. My name is Lucas Lefevre, and I am the vocational coordinator for a public charter school right in DC across the Potomac. Is it Potomac or Anacostia?
It's the Potomac.
Okay, it is the Potomac. All right. Geography was not my number one. So I help students with disabilities find jobs in the community that are tailored to their skills and interests. I found Mark, the guy on my right, 2 years ago, running pachinko machines in what used to be called the Dungeon. And we got talking for a while and then decided to kind of create this panel because we noticed that there was a little bit of a gap in some of this area. About 20% of people in the United States have a disability, and it's a very underrepresented portion of our society. But I will actually pass it to, who's next on the list? Mark.
Hi, I'm Mark. I'm the founder and executive director of the Able Gamers charity. Who here's heard of us before? Yay! Who here thought we had Pachinko for Charity here today? Oh, thank goodness. You did? Oh.
I wanted to believe.
Like 2 months ago we said we couldn't make it, and they put us on the map anyway, so if you go read the map, it says Charity Able Gamers area. We're not there.
Yeah, so don't look for it.
Yeah, it's not there.
And then we have Rebecca.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Murphy. I don't really have any professional connections to accessibility, but I've run the accessibility department at various events for about 3 years now. This is our first year running an accessibility department at MAGFest. So, yeah, I think that's about it.
Nice. And then this kid all the way to the right.
Hi, I'm Jay Kidd. I am the creative director for Wraith Games. We're very focused on accessibility options. I also am disabled myself, and I am an educator of game design at a high school level with a focus on game development accessibility.
Awesome. I would actually like to give a major shout out to Jan and Richard. If you guys could stand up for me and let everybody know where you're at. Jan and Richard are our ASL interpreters for today. So thank you. We appreciate having you. Okay. What we're going to do is kind of just run this as an open forum Q&A. So if you would like to start us off, feel free, raise your hand, and we can go from there.
I will say that I have MAGFest trinkets, including some high-value ones that I give to the best questions.
M points.
M points.
The
yes.
glorious M points, yes.
So you'll know at the end who might get best question. So I want to start with a question, and I want to pronounce to you. So you make a game, it's downstairs, that It's a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun with it, but it's really accessible, but it's not an accessible game in the sense of you're not really marketing it towards players with disabilities. You're making a mainstream game. So tell me why you've made some decisions to make some of the decisions that you have made to make a really accessible game that I found out today my organization gave you an award for.
Well,
They don't tell me things sometimes.
So the big thing about Collapses, which is the game that we're currently working on right now.
That's a plug. That's a plug.
Shameless plug. The big thing about it is the fact that when we originally started its development, I handed it over to just one of my friends. We're a pretty small team. We were very inexperienced at the time, and we couldn't hire play testers. So I handed it to one of my friends. I'm like, play this, play the thing. And he couldn't. He looked at me and he's like, dude, you know I'm colorblind. And one of the key components of the game.
Very color-based.
Yeah, it's all about, I'm gonna say this, you're gonna think wrong things. It's all about matching colors. And so we decided to add UI element stuff to it that would make each color distinct. So we went with like a shape-based UI.
Think Frosted Lucky Charms.
And they're magically delicious. So at that point, we ended up taking it to GDEX, which is the Midwest's largest game development expo. That's a plug right there.
It's also on your lanyard.
Oh, it is.
Not so shameless.
So the thing is that we took it there, and then one of the able gamers, his name's Craig, he came up and he's like, oh, that's a really interesting design choice. Why did you do this? I told him the story. It's like, would you talk with me and my buddy Brian about like accessibility? And so they dragged me aside and we started talking about accessibility. So I'm like, well, if you're interested in doing this, why don't you do a few of these other things? You know, like a fall speed slider, you know, stuff like that, or full colorblind palette stuff. And I'm like, whoa, I could totally do that, and it wouldn't even be hard. Like, we're early enough in development where we could plan for this, you know. And went back to it, and I was staying up late nights, and I was just thinking, I'm like, man, I could do this thing. Like, I could do remappable controls, or I could do left-handed UI switch so people can play it one-handed in their left hand, or dyslexia-friendly font option. I mean, which I should have thought about before. I'm very dyslexic. And so it was that little spark that there are people who could be playing this game, and I'm completely excluding them. Like, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense from a humanitarian standpoint, and it doesn't make any sense from a fiscal standpoint. Like, why would I wall off this entire portion of my audience? It's bad. That'd be absolutely awful.
Yeah.
So that's what got that going.
Do you mind going over a few of those accessibility things that you had incorporated? Because you and I, well, all of us, we were talking at lunch, and you said you had, and I quote, over 40 accessibility features. And I know of at least 5 or 6, but I feel like I'm way out of my league with the over 40 that you had said. Mm-hmm. Can you touch on some of the ones that are not necessarily
like
more well known?
Oh, okay. So top 10 or more well known, or less well known.
I want to. How about you do a mishmash?
Okay, mishmash. So one of the big ones that I found out much later, and I should have. So my wife is deaf in one ear, and she does not have the best hearing in the other ear. And this is something that neither of us had known about: stereo mono toggle. So you can switch between whether or not the sound effects and stuff are coming out of both speakers or one speaker. And we decided to take that a step further and even allow support for like surround sound and stuff. So you can go right into your like sound options and be like, well, I want sound coming out of whatever speakers that I have, and you can just sort of like floop that around a little bit. Technical term, flooping. The next one is a bigger, more well-known one. Completely remappable controls. I don't know a single human being who is completely satisfied with the control choices that they're given to them by default.
I was in the Nintendo like NES days. I'm real old, so I had one with Robbie the robot because it only had the D-pad and 2 buttons. That was enough for me. But now
The
it's,
minimalistic approach.
now
Yeah.
it's 26 buttons and they're always wrong.
Anybody play Red Dead 2? Can't remap that one, can you?
Punch that horse.
No, you cannot. Do you know how many times I have tried to put a dead wolf on the back of my horse and I drop it about 50% of the time? It is awful. I've accidentally shot the trapper, I think, because I tried to hit L2.
Oh wow.
I actually hit R2.
There's no remapability in that game.
If there was, I did a really bad job of finding it.
Because I know those guys.
I know.
Oh, terst email.
I accidentally put somebody on blast.
I think Steve put a couple people on blast from Red Dead as well.
Makes sense.
So remappable controllers are massively important for anybody.
And from a cognitive accessibility standpoint too, having completely remappable controls is one thing, but also try to have some varied presets as well, because sometimes it can be a cognitive barrier to get people to interface with the UI to remap all of the controls. So if you have some easy options with simple names and stuff, that really helps. Like, hey, maybe you have like a lefty control, you know.
Southpaws. Anybody southpaw in here? Yes. I want to fling that guy a wristband, but we can't fling him. We have to be safe, semi-safe.
Wait, why are you flinging my wristbands?
I mean, we're all together. This is a family.
Hey, that was a good question, by the way, so you get an M point.
Ooh.
And I asked the initial question, so I'm getting my own.
We're gonna get those out of the way. Sorry,
of course, yeah.
You're fascinating me with all of these other ones, so I'm just gonna let you go.
Oh,
Keep-
okay. That's
I'm not.
dangerous.
Well, I know you won't. You won't. But we haven't even. I mean, you talked about just two.
Two, yeah.
Of the. Well, Mark said give me 10, but.
That's a lot. That takes a lot of time.
And that's not even 25%.
Yeah.
So, I want to hear like 2 more that are less well known.
Okay, so
Like some out of the box stuff.
Yeah.
Like, you ain't gonna believe this, but scratch and sniff in my game.
Yeah, make me as a special educator step back and go, whoa.
something really unusual. Oh, I have one. Oh, okay. So, this is not something in all versions of the game.
So a giant asterisk.
A giant asterisk, and it's also not something that we have perfected. And it uses a lot of like proprietary Windows, like API stuff. We're working with a company. I don't think I'm allowed to say their name.
Applebee's.
Yeah. Company A.
So what they do is they have created a piece of equipment, and it's a piece of software, sorry, that tracks your eye movement using a camera. And immediately, you guys probably know exactly who we're working with. I'm sorry, guys. But so the ability to track your eyes, and then you can like double blink or open your mouth, and you can actually remap what facial feature you do. Well, so we've been working with them, and they're like, we'll give you our code base, just put it in the game. And I'm like, oh yes, you're amazing, thank you so much. So it's only Windows right now, and
Of course.
we haven't even gotten
That's what they work in.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, but we haven't even, we're still very much in the preliminary stuff of like implementing it, but our game, you know, it can be played with just a mouse already. And that's another thing, like being able to strip down what basic inputs you need to do is also a good thing. But we wanted to be able to, if you're gonna use a mouse, why not use a smile?
I think it's funny. I'm always thinking things in my head because I'm constantly writing my internal jokes. And I just want to tell you the joke that came up when you were talking. It's like it attracts your eyes with your camera versus a wizard. Like what else would it use?
I mean, well, what you do is you take the touch screen and you just put it on your face, and you
That's a
follow.
terrible use case.
There you go. Well, I call it nose rider.
Yeah.
Patent pending.
No.
Nose rider.
It attracts your eyes using magic.
Hey, I mean, if it works and it gets people included,
So I will say, since I don't have any stake in this game, I walked down there and played it for the first time, and was quizzing him like, well, what if I could do this? And he's like, yeah, that's in there. We can turn that on. Well, what about this? Yeah, that's there too. So he's not BSing. Like, I really was trying to think of some real out of the box stuff. Like, what if you can't pick it up and turn it? He's like, yeah, you can turn on this button and it'll just let you like pretend you're turning it.
Yeah, because we have, the game requires you to physically move your tablet by default. And so what we did was we have remappable on-screen UI for the the touchscreen devices, and then also any of that can be remapped to a button. And so since we have button remapping, you could like hook that up to the Xbox accessibility controller, or you could hook that up to the really cool accessibility switches that you can play if you just have move it with your neck. That was one thing that we thought was really cool. So you can just like click, 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 and it works perfectly. But okay, so what would be another?
I want you to dig deep for a second.
Dig deep. That
I
is
think
so
it's
hard.
the number of colorblind options to me.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
that was a large number.
So what we did is we have a whole bunch of colorblind palettes, and they are pre-selected. And I will say, the able gamers have this wonderful, wonderful tool that allow you to open up a screenshot of whatever you're working on, and then it say, oh, I want to see it with Deuteranopia, and you click it, and it's in like a Deuteranopia filter. So you can say, well, people can't see this. I need to remap my colors to fit that. So we took, and I will say, minor suggestion. That tool does not.
It's not our tool. But
It's not your tool.
It's not our tool. We.
You guys tell me about it a lot. So.
Yeah. Oh no. Because if you steal from us, you've stolen twice.
Fair enough.
No, it was a tool. I think it's. I remember the one they gave you. It's a college kid that did it.
Really?
And we tell everybody.
It's absolutely
about it.
amazing.
Yeah.
It's just missing some color blindnesses, which was the suggestion. But the thing is that we took basically all of them. They're like 10, and we're like, oh, we'll just do those. We'll just do all of them. And so I was able to find some really interesting resources about, okay, these are the colors that those eyes can see. These are what they would correlate to other colors. And so we were able to remap a UI like that. We also then took some stuff from, there's the National Foundation for the Blind, something, the name similar to that. They have standards for web about being able to read things in high contrast. So we then have a high contrast mode, one in color and then one in black and white that can be applied to any of those color palettes.
What are the colors? This is my own special educator coming out.
That's not this panel.
Which colors?
What colors do you use for the color, or the
High contrast.
high contrast?
So the high contrast color is whatever the color blind set, it applies it on top of.
So it's a toggle. I
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
this color palette
Gotcha.
in high contrast.
And you can say, so you press it once and it's in that color, and you press it again and it's just high contrast. It's not black, it's really, really dark blue and white. So that's how that sort of works. And then we gave them a tool where they can go mess around with whatever color they want. So you can take any color in the game and say, I want it to be puce instead. And then you can save those color palettes so you can have multiple of them on record, which is really cool.
Or like a 70s color palette, like
Oh,
avocado
yes.
and burnt
Yeah.
orange.
And that even
Pretty much
allows
all
us. That even allows us, from a non-accessibility standpoint, to release like an NES color palette to just for free be like, here's an NES version, whatever. And so that's not just a slider, but we allow you to put in hex values as well.
Yeah.
And these, how we did it. I know I'm going really deep on
You
this.
are.
Sorry.
No, please.
How we did it was all of our assets in the game are white. Every texture in the game
Just
is
put in a filter, like
exactly.
perfect.
And so, like, if you need something to be multiple colors, if it's a shade of the primary color that's just gray, it's whatever. Yes?
Well, I don't want to stop here. Just
Oh, okay.
I was waiting, but
Okay.
I feel you'll go all day on it because you have more research. And that's kind of the question I'm asking is, to what extent have other groups done this? Because I mean, as you are the
Yeah, okay,
guy
so
sitting in front of me, like how many other companies are actually?
if we had this panel like 5 years ago, I would have been like, that guy. But the reality is, game companies all over the industry right now are making games more accessible than they've ever been. Except Red Dead Redemption. Which is funny because Able Gamers is actually one of the only people that have ever wandered the halls of Rockstar. There's a great story one time where Rockstar told me that they didn't have time for this shit several years ago, and to apologize to us when it all blew up in their face, thank you, Twitter. We went to New York City and actually did a complete audit on LA Noire for them, and we've fairly decent relationship. I know Red Dead, the organization that actually did it, isn't the New York one. So, but I will say that we are in an age of accessibility where the basic stuff, not the 41 plus, but the stuff that I think we've all kind of been advocating for as like, can we at least get this, has been adopted. I mean, I've been to Microsoft. I got to sit and have an hour-and-a-half long conversation with Phil. I helped make this. The fact of the matter is, we live in a really good time right now. So to the point where there was a game that was re-released, a classic game that's in the process of being re-released, and they made a conscious decision not to go back and change its accessibility, which was poor. And like people were kind of like putting them on blast, rightfully so, saying like, "Oh, wait a second, you've made this commitment to accessibility. I understand it's a digitally remastered, but you are in fact remastering it. Can we fix some of the more glaring issues?" So to answer your question, it's, I will say Able Gamers has actually had, I spent a lot of end of 2017, beginning of 2019, really having personally a little bit of an emotional breakdown. And I would just like to tell you why, because you're hitting on it. When I started Able Gamers 14 years ago, it was because, I'm a person with disabilities. I'm a service disabled veteran, but my disability is in my lower legs. So unless I'm playing a racing game, it doesn't bother me. My sister had multiple sclerosis, and we used EverQuest to stay connected, and MS decided that she couldn't play EverQuest anymore. That's how that's a really short version of how Able Gamers was born. Early on, we became very clear to us that we wanted to help our fellow players with disabilities, but in fact, the problem wasn't with players with disabilities not wanting to play. It was that the software was just hot garbage. So we really turned to fixing that problem, and we made a decision. What I was actually telling you at lunch, it's something that's important about Able Gamers. Able Gamers isn't incredibly well funded, just so you guys know. We're not I didn't come here in my hover machine or my Bentley, none of that. We have a 3,600 square foot office in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, in the back of a industrial park. We never told a sad story. I always joke that I could have put a player with disabilities on a pedestal with proper lighting and played Sarah McLachlan as they sadly were not able to play a game and could have had a multi-million-dollar charity. But the fact is, if I went to you and said, my friend can't play this game because you didn't add colorblind mode, I could tell you the sad story and emotionally touch you, and you would add colorblind mode, but it didn't really ever affect change for you. What we decided to do as an organization is we looked at the market capitalization of people with disabilities and the fact that people with disabilities have over $1 trillion in expendable income. And by not including accessibility, you're leaving money on the table. And at the very beginning of it, the big companies didn't care. Do you know what changed it? The iPhone. Because the iPhone gave indies a voice, and all of a sudden, games were no longer made by the big five that could tell me to piss off when I said, hey, you're leaving 20% on the table. Activision was like, do you not see the wheelbarrow of $100 bills that gets dumped into our lobby every day because of World of Warcraft? We don't care. But then the iPhone let indies start developing, and indies looked at accessibility as a market differentiator. They said, wait a second, I'm making a small game, I can add a few accessible features and can use that as a way to get people to pay attention to my game. That was the world. So when we were talking to developers like you, indies were like, how can we, not because they, and let's be honest, not because most of them, you have a different world, but most of them were like, I don't really care about accessibility. I care about eyeballs playing my game, and if this is one of the avenues I can use for that, let's do it. And interestingly enough, and I'm going to jump it over to you, because once the accessibility started being a thing, I noticed, because I've been to 14 PAXs and I've been to so many cons, players with disabilities started coming out to cons in greater rates than I'd ever seen, and we're starting to look at developers, especially AAA developers, and go, what about me? And I helped PAX do their accessibility stuff because they came to us and said, Mark, we're having a real problem with accessibility at PAX. Can you help me? So I'd like you to talk about how players with disabilities have been included in the larger gaming space because of this push for accessibility. See, that's called a segue.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like a large part of it too is making the actual events and the gatherings like this accessible as well, because this is where gamers can congregate. This is where you get to come meet other nerds, and to basically say you can go do this yourself, but then when you come here, you're not going to have a good experience, which is unacceptable. And so basically, we have endeavored to work with pretty much every department to try to increase accessibility, doing ADA audits, making sure, hey, this corridor is 30 inches wide. It needs to be 42 such that a wheelchair can get through, and someone can, because, for example, I helped run a convention, and they knew that a standard wheelchair was X inches wide, so they made the hallways in the vendors alley X inches wide. Which does not work that well. So we fixed that, but basically, it's not just about the gaming at home, it's about being able to be part of the community too.
And that's what's so important to me for video games. I mean, a story was told to me one time, and it really it's hard to make me cry because I work in this industry so much, but I was talking to a young lady. She's about 17 or 18, that's young to me. And she was telling me that she went to this school, and in 5th grade, because of the way the school was set up, 6th grade, when they would change classes 3 times, so they had a morning block, a lunch block, and an afternoon block. So they would make the change happen, and then they would let her go to her next class, not during the change. I see the educators shaking their heads. Which meant she was always at the back of the class, and she was always rolling in late. And I say it that way because that's just the way she told me the story. On this new school, it was her first week. On a Thursday, she said she was in her math class getting ready to go lunch, and the teacher had said something about, you guys chat among yourselves until the bell. And the 2 young men in front of the front row of her were talking about World of Warcraft. No one had said anything to her in this math class. This is her 4th day of this new school. No one had said a word to her. She heard these 2 young men talking about World of Warcraft, and she just happened to say, oh, I have a level 49 hunter. And they just turned around instantly and were like, oh my gosh, what server are you on? What do you do? When do you play? What's going on? What's going on? And she tells me this story as the 2 young men are standing next to her at a con because they've been friends for life now. That this one, they did not say a word, but this one shared experience, like what you're talking about, meant all of a sudden instant bond over a level 42 hunter, which is a terrible class.
I don't have that one.
Jump in, jump in.
It looks like we have a couple.
Oh yeah, there's our winning couple.
Ah, the OGs of the panel. Yes.
So, I was wondering if you had any shout outs to specific features and maybe some, mainstream games.
So our question was, is there any shout outs for any features from mainstream games? So I'm going to be honest with you, I'm a terrible gamer now. I don't have time to game anymore. But I will shout out some companies. So EA actually has an accessibility advocate whose only job is to cross across all EA studios and help them make their games more accessible. Naughty Dog was the first company to ever have the word accessibility in a options panel.
Was that Uncharted 4?
Uncharted 4, and they've committed to putting out standards that all PlayStation studios must comply to going forward. Microsoft has done the same. I know that because I helped both of those places write them. So my shout out is to the fact that I was saying I was having a mental health breakdown, and the mental health breakdown that I was having was, Able Gamers set out to cure its cancer, and we cured it. And I find it really fascinating, and what was just really overwhelmed by what I told you, and this is a terrible saying, but it came up at Microsoft. Microsoft has their own little shuttles, these small little buses, and I said, you realize everyone who advocates for game accessibility can fit on that short bus. And we've changed a $64 billion a year industry. Like a handful of people, like this section right here represents all the true in the industry video game accessible professionals. And a $64 billion industry has changed. My vice president is going to Ubisoft in London next week. I have had the privilege to walk the halls of major game studios and played games that you guys wish you could play right now. I got my first game title. As a surprise, we worked really extensively on Call of Duty 4. We're in the credits. That's the world we live in now, which is, we did it.
Yeah.
So I have a feature in a game. I'd like that.
We're coming back to it, yeah.
I'd like this blew my mind. I'm going to tell you right now. I hate Fortnite. I want to say this right now. In my game development class, we have an entire session dissecting why Fortnite is bad.
Love it.
Yeah, and it was actually requested.
forever.
Apparently, all the high school students also hated it, and they're like, "Do a Fortnite class," and I'm like, "Oh, I don't like Fortnite." They're like, "We hate it too. Tell us why it's bad." But here's the feature.
Is it the sound thing?
It's the sound
Yes.
thing.
The sound thing that they did is, does anyone play Fortnite?
I have to watch my kids play.
I'm sorry.
No.
I'm glad no one raised their hand, because I didn't want it to say. Go for it, tell us about it, because I knew exactly where you're going. It's the most amazing thing.
So it started on just mobile originally, from what I've been told, and so it's now made its way into the main game. It is a sound HUD. How it works is there's a directional like circle, and it will tell you what things are making what noise around you. So if you have it on mute, or if you are hearing impaired, or if even it helps with a lot of cognitive disabilities, you can be like, oh no, there's a grenade, and it changes height depending on how close the sound is, and it's just the neatest thing.
Fire, footsteps, everything. As
Wow.
much as I really hated that game, we were doing a project where we were looking for accessibility, and I was just like, that's genius. And again, why? But do you know why it was created? Had nothing to do with accessibility. Because I get to talk to these people. They said because people play our game on a bus, and in places where sound would not necessarily at work. And so they were just looking for a way to kind of give that information. Again, wasn't an accessibility feature. It was your boss doesn't know you're doing it feature. And look what it did.
And that's the thing too, is obviously it could fit into any genre of game. But I don't understand why now every futuristic first-person shooter or third-person shooter doesn't use it, because it would make sense to be in the helmet of like some sort of sci-fi person. Like it should be in every game, not just as like an accessibility option. That should be default for anything that has like a sci-fi HUD, like period.
Fortnite. Yeah, actually, you had your hand right. Yeah.
I'm actually curious on what disabilities you're kind of currently working on making sure are represented, because before you mentioned that it is the time for making sure accessibility is there, but I'm sure there's niche disabilities that haven't yet. Because I thought, for example, I thought that was amazing. You have back there the control you talked about. I think that's amazing. Is there any further ones that you are working on, that disabilities that haven't been covered and you're trying to get more representation for them?
I'm just making sure he was able to hear you, so I didn't have to repeat the question. So I think that personally, visually impaired gamers are getting screwed still, especially our blind friends. They are kind of getting hosed. To answer your larger question, I'm advocating for all players with disabilities. There's no specialty. The controller I showed you is very specific to a physically disabled person, but a physically disabled person is the one who probably will need a custom controller versus your cognitively or your auditory disabled person. It's a software. So really, when you look at disability as a whole, there's a group that really can be supported with a hardware solution, and everyone's supported with a software solution. But if you ask me where I think we need to go, I think that we've largely solved the fact that accessibility is now part of the conversation. We need to deep dive into, so how are we specifically including our visually impaired friends?
Right.
And I want to jump in for a second and say that, like, from a convention perspective, like, we have certain groups that we provide specific services for, but our mentality is we don't care what condition someone has. We want to know what we can do to fix it, because a lot of the things that we can do don't actually, it just requires the right messaging, which sometimes may be slightly less than polite, to the right staffer, and things just happen. A big part of that, though, is that we can't follow everybody around. As much as I would love to assign an accessibility staffer to anybody who needed us. So basically, part of it is also providing the training and the resources such that people feel more comfortable advocating for themselves, because we want to make that really easy. Like, people with disabilities deal with their disability 24/7, 365, and we don't want we don't want people to have to deal with it these 4 days.
Hold on 1 second. You actually have something else on your notes that I really want to touch on real quick, and that is the single point of contact for that. And I found that this one was incredibly intriguing for me as an advocate, where you have all of these volunteers. God bless every single one of you volunteers. This is probably not an easy thing to do or manage. But having that central point of contact allows for sort of a home base to get some of these problems squared away.
Exactly. Like, we don't want someone, especially, someone who has trouble navigating the floor space, to have to go talk to staffer A, to talk to staffer B, to talk to staffer C, because they need a chair moved or something.
Or there were planters on a ramp.
Or there were planters on a ramp, like there were last night. So part of that was, okay, we want an email address and we want a 1-800 number that any attendees can contact, such that we can address stuff as it comes up, because a lot of the person facing the disability is the #1 expert in what their needs are.
Absolutely.
That's a great
And
point.
so
Yeah.
we don't have a lot of prescribed solutions. We just work with people ad hoc to get them what they need. Does that?
It makes perfect sense, because when we talk about accessibility, we have a developer will come and say, like, I want to make sure my game is good for someone with stage 3 kidney disease. It was actually a real question one time. And we say, like, let's not think that way. Let's just add the options, because a player will know what they're looking for in a game. Just put it in there. It was one of the reasons why Able Gamers abandoned its reviews, because we were writing reviews, but you could really read a review and know the nature of the disability of the reviewer. And what we really just started doing was going, does this have remappable keys? Check. Does this have colorblind mode? Check. Does this have a mouse sensitivity slider? Check. Can you invert the mouse? Check. Because our research had shown that a player would basically, I know I need this, this, and this, and I can play the game. So yeah, okay, good. I can care less what you say about the game. I just need to know it has these 3 things.
And I wanna actually bring up something related to that, if that's entirely fine. There's a lot of debate within the accessibility community and the accessibility advocacy community about whether or not accessibility options should be under their own little flag under the options menu. And one of the things that we found out from talking less to people who are advocating for accessibility, but more people who are in need of that accessibility, is that they don't generally think about hitting an accessibility option menu. They're just like, oh, I need to adjust my game speed. That should be in gameplay. And so that's one of the things that if you're putting in a whole bunch of different options and everything, just treat it like it's just a regular part of your game.
So Able Gamers actually advocates for putting it twice. It doesn't actually, you're building menus.
Yeah.
How hard is it for me to ask you to build a menu and put something that's in menu A in menu C
Not
as
even a
well?
little.
So what we've actually, when we've had this very question asked, which was with fold what you want, where you want it, and then anything you believe really is an accessibility, just duplicate it in accessibility tab.
And honestly, it's one of the major problems I think we have at conventions is people are afraid to engage us. Like, they think, oh, my disability doesn't count. Of course it does. Like, we want to help everybody, and so I think that attitude towards fixing problems instead of identifying conditions is just super important.
Yeah, we definitely try to reduce those barriers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Look at that, we did it. We did it!
We got it. I want to see some emotion. Somebody give me something. All the way in the back, in the blue.
So I'm a special ed teacher. I have a lot of kids who love to use games, whether they have autism or some other form of diagnosis. I just kind of want to figure out how can MAGFest kind of expand for that particular community. Because it's mostly been an adult con, which is great. I like being adult and having access to alcohol. But if I would bring a group of my students to MAGFest, how would we ensure that everyone gets to?
Ooh. Give that man some M point.
You don't get to decide that.
I do. I'll give him mine. Holy smokes. That is a question you and I were probably definitely going to have to meet about after. I've thought about this myself. There is about 50 different hoops you probably have to jump through, and about 50 other people you'd have to talk to.
There's one person you have to talk to.
I think that's because we have a point of contact person now. So the main, you stumped me halfway. I think the largest part would be, I mean, MAGFest is literally one of the most welcoming places I've ever been in, bar none. So I don't know if you are going to have to necessarily worry about bringing a group of students, other than, do they have parent permission? Do they have photo release? All these extra little things that we get in the special education world in order to do a CBI or a community-based instruction field trip. Does that kind of answer it? I know that wasn't a great answer, but that was an incredible question.
And if that was something that you wanted to do, like, definitely reach out to us, and we'll try to work with you to make that happen.
I'm actually here doing that right now with like 15 of my students.
Oh, nice.
So you two need to talk as well.
Can I have a shameless plug for him? Because there's teachers. You have this? Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was given Friday morning, and I had 6 people. Raul got them in there in my little panel. Video Games Clubs for America and America. My goal was to start a video game and board gaming club to connect kids in every middle school and high school in the country. So if you're interested, 10:30 tomorrow, they put me on the schedule again. There's a shameless plug.
10:30 tomorrow.
My son's autistic, and it's connected me with him. So
What's your panel room?
what's up?
What room?
They put me in Woodrow Wilson panel 2. I'm the only 10:30 on the map on the like the guidebook thing. So
Nice.
shameless plug. Thank you. I'm glad. And
Hey.
I'd love to talk to you. This is here too.
We love including people.
Yeah. No, that's the whole point of it.
No, it's great. I'm gonna let somebody else choose.
You in the red shirt, you had your hand up first.
A lot of the games we build involve positional relevance, where there's a game state, it moves in real time, things are moving around non-discretely. And for gamers who are visually impaired or blind, it can be difficult to communicate that game state effectively using sound. Do any of you have any examples of games that have encountered that problem and surpassed it well?
So I'm going to say the answer is no. I do know that like Street Fighter is very visually impaired friendly because every movement has a very distinct sound, and I know I've met some really good blind Street Fighter players. The reality is, if you're looking to a day where all video games are universally accessible, I'm not sure that we're going to get there in my lifetime. I think video games as we know it will morph to something else that might be universally accessible, but as long as they're on a television screen, we're always going to have to make choices. That's why I said earlier that I think visually impaired gamers are kind of getting a little shafted. That said, I think that the indie world is starting to step up and try to fix some of those problems. But I think the AAA titles, I could go into a long diatribe. I actually talked to the developers of Grand Theft Auto 5 on what it would take to make it blind accessible. And we did numbers. We actually looked through math and everything like that. And the answer is never, because it would never be economically viable. And the reason why was because after spending almost $100 million to make it blind accessible, the amount of sales that they increased that they would have, and I actually have this number memorized, was 0.0000921% increase in sales for $100 million. So I think as long as games are on a screen, we're always going to have that challenge.
Can I ask, just as a follow-up, what the features they spec'd out to make GTA blind accessible were?
Which was to add a full 7-speaker surround sound system in it, give everything a distinct sound and volume. So it was basically a completely gutting and rebuilding the soundscape engine for it, for what was ultimately 13,000 increased sales for a game that sold 9.6 million copies.
I do want to point out one thing though, which is important. I think an important consideration is that there is, and of course I had the terminology for it until I started talking. But the classic example, and maybe someone else can fill me in, is like the
Cost benefit.
like the curb cuts on roads. Like those are an accessibility feature, but they help everyone. So like, while I understand the argument of this costs X million dollars and we're going to increase sales by this much, it's not, you can't look at it like that. You've got to look at it as we're making our game better and it also benefits these people.
Well, and I would agree, except remember, curb cuts weren't installed until the federal government demanded it.
I would also like to say that with the way the sound engine would work, that sounds like something that would be easier to put in when you're making an engine for multiple projects.
Yeah, this is
think.
years and years old. So
Yeah.
remember, at the time, this was years and years old.
Are you saying make it as you go? Like
So-
as you're designing the engine?
So what I'm saying is that for me, the best way to approach accessibility is to have the planned accessibility features be baked into your design from the very beginning.
Oh, agreed.
Yeah.
As you're building your code base. So
Yeah,
the
best
idea would
practice.
be, as you're building your engine, if you're using something first party, to start building that feature in from the ground floor, and especially if you plan on using that engine for multiple projects. That sounds like something that would be fairly simple and a lot more cost effective. Just my brain sort of thinking.
Universal design is the term.
Oh
Yeah.
Yeah. You just,
Um,
I want to go all the way on what's my right or the left on the outside row. Yes, you just waved your hand. Yes.
Yes, my name is Amber Woods, and I'm with the National Federation of the Blind. And my position is first vice president of the National Harbor Chapter locally. And what I've noticed that within my organization, we have a lot of younger people who want to do video games. And so I'm glad I was able to come to this panel today because I want to bring more awareness and actually encourage more of my members to come to conventions and also other blind people, so they don't have to actually be part of the NFB. But we like to bring more awareness too, so I would like to actually get in contact with you guys and hope with collaborations.
Oh, heck yeah.
Sure.
Yep.
In July, we have our national convention, so that's why I'd like to keep in touch with you guys. So that's
let's pop up after the convention and we'll trade information.
okay. Perfect.
Also, thank you
Or
because
panel.
Yeah. After the panel, just hang around and we can.
She said convention, so that was what was in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want you to have to wait until tomorrow.
Okay, good.
So I do want to say thank you also because I had mentioned your organization earlier, and I'm like, foundation, society, it's one of those. Federation, thank you so much.
Federation. Okay. Mark, you're up.
Oh, I get to pick somebody?
Have you guys seen any improvements on features that help for gamers with tinnitus? Because I've noticed like soundtracks and sound design, I work in sound design, keep getting more lush and lush, and we're trying to spread more things and using it to tie the UI. But there are some frequencies that people cannot handle. I feel like you always get the volume filter maybe, or you turn down the ambience, you turn down the dialogue, but what people really need is a filter to cut off certain frequencies that just make the game unbearable.
Oh, that's new for me too, and I have tinnitus.
The autism world.
That's a good-
My son is spider senses essentially. So high pitched noises, he'll,
Yeah.
at some frequencies, it's crazy.
Flash and trees, that's
Yeah.
similar frequencies.
Yeah, and there's also PTSD. People with PTSD have these same features. So if you're interested in another add-on,
Yeah, I'd like
it's
to.
actually super
Wow.
legit.
Great question.
Give me 2 weeks and I'll make it work.
He's gonna put a dial in that makes it so that you can choose which ones to shut off. Yeah.
These are new design drivers.
Yeah.
Oh, an equalizer.
Even if it's like stuff, like what I really wish could be made is something universally, because audio mixes and DAWs, like having just one filter you could run on your machine, play anything, and it could cut off whatever frequency is going through your sound system.
I like
and
that.
You could bypass, because I worked in company and independently as someone on the audio team, and it's always a battle to fight any features in that are audio related, and I feel like if it's something that people could download and have after the fact, it would make so many more people happy.
Oh yeah.
And if it's customizable, kind of like we're talking about the colorblind thing, you have different levels that you use, because not everyone has the same color levels.
Right.
Not everybody has the same sensitivity to different audio frequencies. Some folks can't take bass at all. It just, yeah.
My son, 3
But
notches
just
up.
tinnitus, I've heard that more and more come up as problems, and I haven't heard so much.
I'd like to talk to you afterwards as well, because I have another project that I'm working on.
Likewise.
You, the gentleman with the glorious beard.
Just 2 things. One really fast one. As someone who's colorblind, I really appreciate everything that Able Gamers has done to help to raise more awareness of that, because it's definitely like something that's getting better and games are getting more accessible for that. So first of all, just thank you for the focus on that.
Thank you.
The second thing is, you mentioned that you weren't sure where to go, like from here, because of how big of an impact it can make, like in the industry as a whole. As the industry is moving towards the digital distribution and moving to a way that we're already seeing outside of accessibility, where games are getting shipped like commercially complete, we're in this like agile development environment where everything is very like just iterative and get it out as soon as you can. Do you have any concerns that the progress you've done will kind of get undone as companies decide that accessibility is not like a definition of MVP for release?
That's a really good question. So to your very last statement, the thing Able Gamers works on is making sure that accessibility is put in at the beginning. Therefore, it is by default always included in MVP, which is minimal viable product for those that don't work in the industry. We're working on something to help foster that. I'm also under a bunch of NDAs on some stuff. You are correct in your thought process. I think that Steam Early Access is kind of a bane in the gaming existence because everything stays in early access. I understand your concern. I am working very hard to make sure that the thing that you are concerned about is not in fact a concern. To your first point, I appreciate the kind words. We were having a crisis of where we needed to go because we made such an impact. We are now knowing where we're going, and we're now being able to focus back to the player with disability that we always wanted to do. We've created a new maker space where we're creating custom controllers for people. Able Gamers, like we haven't announced it publicly, but we just filed our second patent on some new stuff that we've been working on. It was just really that whole, when you've made such a change, kind of like absorbing that and figuring out what to do. And so on that point, if there's something in the world you want to change, Able Gamers is proof that you can change it no matter how big it is. So thank you.
I think you guys have had your hands up. I just want to touch on this side as well. Blue.
My best friend from elementary school has muscular dystrophy, and one of our favorite game companies together is Nintendo. But we've seen over the years how their options kind of suck. From the minor to the major, I'm a lefty, and on their DS, left-handed versus right-handed controls have kept me from games. And in 2006, when the Wii came out and they decided they were married to motion controls, they kind of kicked him out the door. And it even continues now. New controllers on the Switch he likes a lot, but when a mini game pops up in Mario Party and they tell him to shake that controller as fast as he can, there's nothing he can do about that, and they don't have an option to even say turn off motion controls, let him use a button or anything. So what would be the best way for us to try and approach them about that, like in a constructive way to say,
I feel like you might have some
shouting in the voice.
Oh my gosh. Who's taping this? So interesting enough, earlier in 2018, so what would be early last year, someone asked Nintendo North America's gentle person a similar question about accessibility in the space, to which he said, "Oh, I've noticed that is," his basic quote was, "It's a conversation the industry should start talking about." To which I screamed at my computer, "We've been talking about it for 15 effing years. Where have you been?" Nintendo, you have to understand how people with disabilities are looked at in Japan. And then you understand why Nintendo is very late to the game. From a societal level, the actual disabled is defective. And I will say that I know several dozen people in Nintendo who want more accessibility. But until management buys into it, that said, I think they're getting the picture because all of their competition is doing more than paying lip service to it. And as much as this is not the perfect product, I have a lot of criticism about this product, it does show a commitment.
What product is that?
This is the adaptive controller from Microsoft.
Great, thank you.
And it shows a commitment to players with disabilities that basically says to every other company out there, your move. And they're paying attention.
So I was actually going to mention about the Japanese disability culture, but there's another layer to that onion that you have to really think about. So oftentimes here in the West, you think of a Japanese company as being slow to change. You think of them as being traditionalists and stuck in their ways. Well, Kyoto companies specifically are seen by the rest of Japan as being like the West sees Japanese companies. They see them as being traditionalists who won't change unless it's absolutely necessary. And I don't think that it's, especially with the way there is sort of the disability as defective culture in Japanese society, I don't think that there's, I don't want to be a pessimist, I guess, but it's something major is going to have to change.
The reality is not having accessibility is becoming a competitive disadvantage, to use the technical business terms, and they're starting to understand the competitive disadvantage they are at, especially when you look at Nintendo skewing towards children and autism. And when they are getting absolutely trashed in the media by autism I can never say the word, advocates, because I want to play what my friends are playing, and when they can't. So all that aside, I think that they are starting to understand that they are way behind, because in Splatoon, they just got rid of the motion control, and so you can do something else now instead. So they're starting to understand that they need to change.
And they're working on controller remapping for projects as well.
So this actually segues into that. We've talked a lot about visual impairments or people who have issues with hearing, but I want to talk about cognitive disabilities. I'm a speech language pathologist. I work with children who have autism, who are functioning, and they want to play the Pokemon games. They want to play Splatoon. But I also work with the children who, like we mentioned earlier, are using eye gaze devices on an accent device where they're looking at the picture on the screen to indicate their choice. And a lot of these kids I work with, they want to play the video games, but they do not understand the basic linguistic concepts of in, on, under, my, your. So how are we changing games or even making games that are accessible to people who do have these cognitive difficulties?
I think your passion comes through. I thought she was going to hit me at one point. And by the way, he never said eye gaze. He said accompany.
Right.
I think that you are the answer. So tell me what I need to tell them, because they're listening to us now. Correct?
Yeah.
So if you're seeing as he said earlier, and as you said, you have to live with your disability, and it's unique to you. You're seeing the world very differently than a lot of other people. Share what you're seeing and let us advocate for you, because that's a brilliant thought process.
Oh, yeah.
But that's not my world. So, I invite you, I encourage you to use your voice and let advocates with a greater reach amplify it for you. Teach us, and we'll teach them.
And let me second that. Like, if there's anything at Fest that we can do, I am always happy to learn.
And it can be difficult for developers, especially who, they're not experiencing disability. They're not experiencing, in many cases, especially cognitive disability. Though I will say there are a disproportionately high number of people on the autism spectrum in the STEM fields. Oh, what?
We have to be done.
Oh.
Sorry, we ran over.
Go finish up.
Okay. By the way, I'm in a STEM field and I'm on the autism spectrum. You can tell because I just did that. So the thing is, though, that developers who are, not with these disabilities every single day of their lives, they don't know about them. And so having the ability to make noise, especially as small devs, we care and we want, like, if we see a problem, we want to solve it. So speak up, and not just to the advocacy groups, but also to the developers themselves. Though the advocacy groups are an amazing point of contact for the individual developers.
Wonderful. If there are any participants that would like to ask questions after we wrap this up, because we are over time, and I apologize to whoever's out there waiting for the next one, come and see us stop me in the hallway. We can chat. You're super friendly. You're super friendly. You are at the accessibility booth, for goodness sake. Also super friendly. We love to talk about this stuff. Stop and ask us. You can even ask me as soon as we leave this doorway.
That's true.
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming and being advocates in any way, shape, or form. We appreciate it. Hopefully we'll see you next time.
I have stickers and bracelets that I will give people as well.
Thanks, everybody.